The three most important people in pop culture were Walt Disney, Jim Henson, and Jack Kirby.
Jack Kirby is potentially the most impactful commercial artist of the 20th century.
If you were a great comic creator, you get one character. You get Superman or you get Batman. Jack got everybody else. Captain America, Iron Man, the Hulk, Thor, the Silver Surfer.
While Stan Lee was the person who was guiding Marvel Comics as a brand, it was Jack Kirby's creativity that was constantly innovating and making Marvel Comics possible.
So the Skirball is a cultural center. The museum is within the larger cultural center. We look for exhibitions that can be an art exhibition, a pop cultural exhibition, a history exhibition, and in the case of Jack Kirby, we've got all three.
I never imagined that comic books would be celebrated in this setting. To be able to bring it into the real world and share it with people and make it a communal experience that recognizes and celebrates the creators is an amazing opportunity. I hope that in doing this, we not only recognizing the sacrifices that Jack Kirby made in order to do this, but helping to right some of those wrongs that he suffered in finally giving him his recognition and his due.
Growing up as a child of Jewish immigrants on the Lower East Side, seeing the world as it was there, seeing in the way that he draws the Thing, who is very clearly this sort of like Lower East Side Jewish character.
The Thing Hanukkah card is a particularly amazing artifact. Someone sent Jack Kirby a Hanukkah card. He sent back the family Hanukkah card, but then drew a picture of the Thing in a yarmulke on this card and sent it to this fan, who then became a friend. There is not a piece of Jack Kirby's art or a single one of his stories where you cannot see the effects of his life. When the largest Nazi rally on American soil was held at Madison Square Garden, that was 1 block from the Fleischer Studios where Jack Kirby had worked. When he and Joe Simon created Captain America, the first issue was published a year before the US entered World War II. That cover is Captain America punching Hitler, and there are plans in the background for an invasion of the US. It was not just a reaction to events, it was in fact a call to action.
And although we think of Marvel's 1960s work as being very optimistic, there's a lot of darkness in there. There's a lot of anger, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of unceasing villainy. I think that Jack understood this idea that all this lightness has a real shadow to it. These are people who also happen to be heroic. We're gonna look at the heroic through the ways of common people. And he felt, well, if comics are not reflecting that yet, I'll be the one that does that. And then in 1978, he drew the Silver Surfer for the last comic he did for Marvel. There were individual pages where you could tell Jack was just firing on all cylinders here, and this was one of them, showing him in agony, falling in different ways, with the surfboard and his body lining up with all of the rooftops in Manhattan as he gets smaller and smaller. It is a parable for the fall of man right there. Absolutely gorgeous.
I think there's a drive and a fearlessness in the work that he did. You know, I mean, he was just so driven by the worlds that he wanted to create that he didn't pause to think about whether the time was right for that. He really kind of pushed those boundaries. In terms of the Black Panther, we were extremely lucky to have a loan to this exhibition, a work that had never been seen before, the character study for the Black Panthers. When you see that piece, what you'll note is that it looks very different. The face, which is not wearing a mask, is sort of modeled after Sidney Poitier, who had won the Academy Award that year. This is happening at the height of the civil rights movement. It really changes the dialogue for people who are reading those things by introducing this superhero.
That Black Panther concept drawing that is a moment in history. There is a moment in time where T'Challa, the Black Panther, only existed on that sheet of paper and in Jack's imagination. To see that moment of creation, this character that now resonates with audiences around the world, this belongs in a museum.
Marvel did not give its art back to its artists until the mid-70s. Marvel just kept the art. Well, then why aren't you giving it back to the artists? Well, if we give it back to the artists, they might have the copyright on the character. They weren't really sure. So Kirby didn't get a page back, nothing. They just wouldn't give him the art back because they were very worried about him claiming the characters in some sort of way, claiming ownership. And it wasn't until 1987, I think, they finally gave him the art back. I think when he was at Marvel, he drew something like 10 to 12,000 pages of artwork. He got roughly 2,000 back. As soon as I learned that, I'm like, well, how do you get art directly from Jack? I wanted really him to benefit. And I went to this 1993 Comic-Con down in San Diego, and Jack was there. And he was behind a table and there's nobody there talking to him. And so I went up and I talked to him. And this is my only conversation with Jack. And I gave him a short story I'd written. And I explained how much he meant to me and how much he'd affected my life as a writer. And he was very gracious about it. And I showed him a photocopy of the piece of monster art I bought for $275. And he was very friendly about that. And I said, look, this might have come from you originally, I don't know, but how do you feel about your artwork selling for many thousands of dollars, and you're not able to participate in much of that? And I can't do his voice exactly, but if you just sort of imagine the Thing talking back to you, right? He was like, kid, you ever hear of a guy named Peter Paul Rubens? It took me a second. I said, yeah, I have. He said, Peter Paul Rubens, in his lifetime, couldn't sell his artwork for a sou. Now you can't touch a Peter Paul Rubens for less than $2 million. I have to stop doing that. So he said, if I can't participate in it, it means that they're selling this stuff off and they're saying my art is fine art. They're saying my art is as good as Peter Paul Rubens. And my entire life, I did my work and I kept my family fed with it. And that's what I'm proud of. And that gave me some sort of fuel to keep collecting and being interested. He understood that it was something special. Jack knew to the thrill of his bones this would exist. Not just movies, but also movies that were important to people. I think that Jack would have been absolutely thrilled at the Marvel movies, for instance, because he knew he wasn't just getting into like somebody in a superhero suit, he was getting into the needs that were underneath that. Who does that? Well, somebody who understands mythology and who grew up with spirituality in his house and understood there's the rational and then there's the rest of our mind. And he knew how to make the rest of our mind catch on fire.